The French rule of Algeria began in 1830 and lasted until the independence in 1962. Algeria was unofficially known as Algérie française, or French Algeria. Initially, France invaded Algeria's borders through a naval bombardment and military expedition, using Napoleon's 1808 contingency plan of Algeria. On the 14th of June, 1830, Général de Bourmont arrived 27 kilometers to the west of the capital Alger, with over 340,000 soldiers, causing conflict and response from the Algerians, thus beginning the 132-year French rule. Algeria was one of France's longest-held overseas territories. On the 1st of November 1954, the Algerian people began the brutal 8-year war, which eventually led the French out, and on the 5th of July 1962, independence was finally declared. One of the aspects heavily influenced by the colonial period was the architecture of Algeria. Larger cities like the capital Alger, Oran, Tlemcen and Constantine have very distinct French influence in the way that they are built. I travelled to Alger in February to see this firsthand. Alger is split into two main sections, La Casbah and Le Bâti Colonial. Le Bâti Colonial are all the French-built buildings. This area of land was initially the base of La Casbah. The French, however, destroyed this to build Le Bâti Colonial, which during the colonial period accommodated all the European workers living in Alger. Then La Casbah was left for the Algerians to live in, thus creating a division between the French and the Algerians. Today, the French-built buildings are at the front lines of Alger, distinctively known by their white walls and black French-style balconies. The buildings themselves are very beautiful, however they are old, and the interior structure has become damaged. The buildings are capable of falling, but reconstructing them would be hard, as they are based in the heart of the capital. Alger's inhabitants, otherwise known as les Algerois, are very adamant that Le Bâti Colonial remains untouched. Perhaps the buildings serve as a reminder of the city's history, or they give a more westernized Parisian look to the city. Either way, Le Bâti Colonial remains as a very important part of Alger, and highlights one of the ways in which there is French influence in Algeria today. La Casbah is a unique network of interwinding streets, filled with houses and home businesses. The streets are so narrow that cars cannot pass through, and to make your way from one place to another you can only go by foot. La Casbah was a crucial place during the war, as planning and organisation against the French occurred there. Today, La Casbah serves more as a tourist attraction, and whilst many people still live there, its importance isn't as significant as it was during the war. To get a better insight as to how French influence is present in Algeria today, I contacted and interviewed an elderly man named El-Haj Zubir, who was a worker during the colonial period and survived the war whilst living in La Casbah. I asked him where he thinks French influence is most prominent in Algeria today.
L'identité française prête le bâti.
Le bâti colonial, il y a beaucoup de choses. احنا نتكلموا فرنسيس.
عطيني في اللغة.
ماشي égalité, mais tous ceux qui sont nés avant l'indépendance, ils parlent français couramment sans avoir été à l'école. Là, pareil, ils étaient obligés
de communiquer.
Il reste la tenue vestimentaire. On ne s'habillait pas comme ça.
Donc le bâti, le langage, les vêtements. Je me plais.
على كلش عبالو ضربوني. كلمة كيما انت ما يقولكش بلي انا عندي البوك، يقولك عندي البوكلة. البوكلة راهي في راس الكلام.
والبوك.
Le bouc, ça c'est le bouc. Donc les gens ne savent pas parler. Voilà. يقولك اش داير؟ يقولوا عنده واحد البوكلة هنا. عنده البوك ماشي البوكلة.
فرنسا عربية.
إيه، non mais الفرنسي عربية ça c'est.
une boucle.
C'est un bouc.
دونك شغل فرونسي بصح فرونسي غلطة.
كيفاش؟
شغل جاي شغل فرونسي ماشي
غلط.
غلط ماشي فرونسي وماشي عربية.
ما نهضروا العربية، ما نهضروا فرنسي.
talking with Al-Hajj Zubir highlighted some of the issues Algerians face in their language, because as a result of the French influence in the Algerian dialect known as Darja, there is a mix of the two languages in one, and the Algerian dialect can't really be classified as either French or Arabic. Algerians have created a language which isn't present anywhere else, and this language is hardly understood by Middle Eastern Arabs or by the French. Presence of the French language is apparent almost everywhere you go, as most of the street signs and shop signs are written in French. There is also the presence of the Berber language and the English language. However, even if there is sometimes a mix in languages, it is important to mention the fact that as a result of this French influence in Algeria, most of the Algerian population is either bilingual or trilingual, meaning that Algerians do have access to a large proportion of the world, just from the languages that they speak at home. To explore the idea of language even further, I spoke with Réda Sabih, a professor in sociolinguistics at the University of Alger. I asked for his opinion on the effects of the colonial period in Algeria today.
Les traces de la colonisation française dans les pratiques quotidiennes en Algérie, aujourd'hui, elles sont multiples, elles sont plurielles. Alors tout d'abord, bien sûr, elles sont sur le plan architectural, puisque Alger et Oran et d'autres villes gardent très bien cette trace sur le plan urbanistique et architectural, parce qu'on voit très bien le bâti colonial dessiné par Le Corbusier donc sur la façade d'Alger. Mais il y a d'autres traces qui sont plus importantes et plus révélatrices des orientations françaises et de la doctrine que voulait inculquer la France de l'époque. Il faut tout d'abord différencier la trace de la marque. La trace, elle est généralement involontaire, alors que la marque, elle est volontaire et destinée à un objectif bien précis. Je vous renvoie entre autres Francis Ripoll qui traite de la trace et de la marque. La France n'a pas voulu laisser des traces mais des marques, puisque ce sont des marques identitaires qui ont influencé la société algérienne. Et aujourd'hui, l'Algérie continue, entre guillemets, non pas à souffrir, mais à vivre avec ces marques identitaires françaises qui ont marqué d'abord le langage, puisque sur le plan linguistique et langagier, il y a beaucoup de mots français. Donc l'algérien, l'arabe dialectal, est essentiellement bilingue entre le français et l'arabe. C'est ce que nous reprochent beaucoup de voisins et beaucoup de populations arabo-musulmanes, d'avoir justement gardé ces traces qui sont devenues identitaires de l'algérien. Et on n'arrive toujours pas encore aujourd'hui à se dissocier de ces traces-là. Elles sont sur le plan culturel, puisqu'on continue à vivre un peu à la mode française et au rythme un peu français, pas beaucoup, mais on continue à vivre, si vous voulez, à la mode française, parce qu'il y a une politique qu'on appelle la politique linguistique. Et cette politique linguistique, la France investit beaucoup dedans. Ça veut dire que beaucoup de pays maghrébins et africains, d'anciennes colonies de la France, continuent à vivre un peu sous l'emprise politique et identitaire du colonialisme.
At first, it would be easy to say that the colonial period in Algeria only affected language, but it is important to realise that French culture has submerged itself into Algerian society. The French rule had a very large impact in Algeria, and its effects are seen today. This can be seen in the architecture, language, the culture, and the social identity of Algerians. Algeria will always be a country with French roots, and therefore its people will always be connected to France, or French culture, in one way or another. Essentially, the Algerian people have become a people mixed with Western and Arab influence, incorporating different languages and cultures, and have come from different places to create their own unique identity.